Hello and welcome to the Health Chat. I'm your host, Vicky Tsoleridis, and today I'm joined once again by the lovely Mark Wells. And he's returned back to our podcast because he's just launched his new updated version of the Essential Flower Essences book, which many of you are probably aware of, but this new updated version has so much more to offer. And I thought this would be a great platform for Mark to talk about his new book because he does have quite the cult following on our socials as well as on our YouTube channel. We always get comments about how insightful or how much people have learned about particular flower essences. And this book is just a wonderful reference point for all the questions you may be asking. There are so many flower essences that he explores in his book. It's not just the FES range, there's bark, there's Australian bush, and many more. And I'll let Mark talk more about that. So without further ado, welcome, Mark. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Vicky, and thank you for that intro. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to let people know about this upgrade of my new book. Upgrade of the old book into a new book. And look, I just think it's probably taken a little bit more editing and changing than I expected, but I wanted to get it right, and I wanted to add or inject into the book another 20 years experience of practice and prescribing flower essences virtually for every client I see, plus other, I am a naturopath and counsellor, but it's just I think there's just such great opportunity for obviously naturopaths, natural therapists, but any therapist to utilize flower essences in their practice to help people. And it's more and more every day we need the help, particularly on the emotional side, with the world the way it is, the way we live, etc. And this, to me, this book outlines. It's got the theory and practice. From all my experience of teaching, of prescribing, but it's also got probably really has very in-depth descriptions of the main remedies that are used throughout the world, let alone Australia.
Now, I just thought we'd just take a step back for just one moment, because I'm
Sure.
sure there will be listeners that are not practitioners themselves and want to understand more about this type of therapy, because it may seem a little bit unusual. And look, admittedly, to me, it was a few years ago, but now it's become quite an integral part of our life. And I was hoping you could explain some of the energetics and how flower essences work on humans or even animals before we dive into the actual book.
Okay, well, flower essences, I suppose there is a relationship between flower essences and homeopathy. And the main relationship is that it does use very small, there's a very small component of the actual flower left in the remedy, but that makes it much more subtle. But that's the part of our systems that we're targeting, the subtle mechanisms, the subtle side of ourselves, the energetic sides, if you like. And similar to when you look at traditional Chinese medicine and the energy meridians, and that's well accepted. There's lots of research on it that it explains how these things work on that level and can work on that level and can be very therapeutic. And flower essences, look, there is a huge amount of research in homeopathy, and there's a building amount in the flower essences that certainly supports that works. I conducted a double-blind trial on with rescue remedy some years back. It's in the book, plus some other research, and of course it came out positive that rescue remedy does help people, particularly in the areas of tension and anxiety. But if you want a nice little neat rational scientific explanation, I probably can't give that to you. But all we can say is there's a lot of scientific evidence that says, hey, it works. In years to come, we'll probably understand more about how it works. I mean, things like aspirin and Disprin were on the market for many, many years before they had a nice little scientific explanation of how they work, but they knew they worked. And flower essences are the same. And there's always that, I suppose, self-regulating and safety mechanism within flower essences, that it is only using a small component of the actual flower, a very minute amount, microscopic amount. And as a consequence of that, it's safe. It's completely safe. And the worst it can do for you is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's it. But I think for in terms of other practitioners or people that really aren't familiar with flower essences, it's just an opportunity. It doesn't matter what, there's osteopaths using it. I now supervise a couple of psychologists who want to integrate flower essence therapy into their practice. And that's one of the great things about flower essences. It can be integrated into other modalities, other health therapies. And it doesn't, if someone's mastered one area, they will be able to see where they could utilize that if they have a look at flower essence therapy. And as I said, this book is an opportunity for people to sort of get a much better understanding. And it really does explain a lot about the tools that are at offer within flower essence therapy.
That's a really good way to round that off. And now, you mentioned earlier that there's about 15 to 20 years of experience that has gone into this book. I can't believe it's actually been that long. But what have been some of the major differences that you found in that time? And what was the top three things that you were looking at updating?
I think there's a few things. First of all, what the earlier book is not wrong. The information's there, but I've got more information. I've been able to elaborate on it. And quite frankly, too, I mean, that was probably after about 20, 25 years of practice. And now I've added that sort of 15 to 20. The landscape's changed. I mean, just with political correctness. I mean, even the language, had to be updated and upgraded a bit there. But I just think they're more well-rounded descriptions. There are some of the ones that were in the research area that, to me, if I look at them, they're a bit, a bit skeleton. I need more. And I've been able to fill that in, give it much more body and much more context. And some of the other ones that I had a smaller description of, I've been able to elaborate on, and just a better understanding. And one particular area, and I will qualify what I'm going to say by saying, look, you don't prescribe flower essences, for a physical ailment. But flower essences can have a dramatically positive impact on physical ailments if it matches on the emotional and mental and attitudinal level. And I think even in that area, because of all the more many years experience I've had, I've seen certain illnesses, certain ailments, certain physical conditions that seem to be associated with people who respond to a particular flower essence on a regular basis. So, every time I prescribe this, well, not every time, but a lot of the times I've prescribed this for people, they've had this particular ailment. Trumpet vine, invariably there'll be a history of throat infections or problems, tonsillitis, whatever. So I've been able to, again, elaborate on that just through experience and seeing more and more clients. You get that information. And of course, it makes sense, and that's one thing I like to do. Okay, I think we accept now, and there's lots of research, that there's a very strong connection between the body and the mind. And as Carl Jung said, the body and mind are just the opposite side of one coin. And if we look at the body-mind connection, you can make sense of why that particular plant would help a person with this particular physical condition. So I've been able to, as I said, elaborate more on that. I have a section when I'm describing a remedy that's called possible physical outcomes, and it's there that I say, look, always, if the person is matching this particular remedy on that emotional and psychological side, it's probably more apt for them if they're also have a tendency to these type of physical problems. So there's a real you can feel confident that, gee, I'm matching this for this person, and it's going to enable a lot of progress in their health if they take this. And I think, just on that note too, I think we still underestimate the potential in flower essences. I know a lot of practitioners say, oh, they're all very nice, and it's a bit like adding a few herbs to your cooking or something like that, or to what you're giving, but they say, they're not that powerful. But it's nice to put them in there, and we like to have a chat with our clients about it. But that's not the case. There can be quite profound responses to flower essences, which have an incredibly positive impact on not just the emotional and the mental, but the physical as well.
I couldn't agree more. There's a lot to be said about how powerful they can be. I've seen it with my children. And just on that, you were talking about like the physical manifestation. I guess in the last 15 years, there's been a lot more variety of physical manifestation or recognition of. So my mind goes to when someone's got a stomach bug or a continual stomach problem. We used to just think, oh, that's just related to the gut, but now we realize, well, that now manifests in so many other places. So would you agree that over these 20 to 25 years, there's been such a much more diverse range of ailments, or more complicated, I would say?
It has become that. Medical science contributes to that, and I think it's necessary. I could give the obvious example. We talk about COVID. COVID's still a virus, and I still haven't seen anything in the last 3 or 4 years where it hasn't behaved like all the other viruses I've ever known. It seems to be obviously very apt for human beings at this particular time. And we are susceptible to it, there's no doubt. But just in the way we've gone into it, the way our understanding of that particular virus has, yes, it's made it more complicated in a way, but we do have more understanding there. You spoke about the gut. As a naturopath, when I first started practicing, we would say, and iridology is certainly part of my practice, and we would say we'd go straight to the gut. We want to know what's going on with the gut because it has so much influence on other areas. We weren't talking in terms of so much like probiotics and bowel flora, but we were dealing with that. But we just had a less sophisticated language, if you like, to describe.
That's true.
And that's what I say about even going back into my own book. There's more of a sophisticated language in terms of the way I'm describing the remedies. And that's what's needed. As you say, the world's traveling in a certain direction. And if we're looking at more specific things, specific ailments, and we're becoming more sophisticated in that area, we need remedies that are going to keep track with that or keep up with that.
It was really interesting. I've been doing quite a lot of research in this area or this space of energetics. And it was mainly because there's a device that is currently being tested for IBS, but it's actually not an oral remedy as such that is designed to completely resolve it, but more one that you listen to. So it's a very relaxing it's like I don't know if it's how to explain it, but it's just like certain audio that you listen to that helps relieve gut associated problems.
Yeah.
And that led me to another research article about microcurrents. And I remember TENS machines back in the day using very soft micro impulses to help sort of, I don't feel it relieved the pain, but it helped to disassociate the sensation of pain so that you could carry on with your day-to-day activity. So there is, I believe, going to be a huge push in this space because I can see it in the marketplace. We always want something that's tangible. So we always go for that electronic sort of device, but there's so much more in these other types of therapies, like you suggest with homeopathy and flower essences, that needs to be explored. And there's an abundance of research in the space. You just got to go filter through. So back to the book just for a sec, or for the entire podcast, I should say. I would love to know how the book is broken down. So can we search by the flower essence name? Do we search by an ailment? How is the book sort of categorized?
Well, it's the remedies are in alphabetical order, but I have a little, well, it's not little, it's a number of pages at the end which lists particular attitudes, particular feelings, particular moods, and within that there will be a dozen remedies, perhaps 6 to a dozen remedies to consider, and you can go back and say, okay, well, that one really does hit the mark. And that's another. It's not an obstacle. It's a great thing that we have, many, for fear. Okay, there's all sorts of different types of fear, but there's all sorts of different types of remedies for that. And just going back to what you were talking about, things have become more sophisticated now. There's not one remedy for fear. There's not one, remedy for sadness. There's a number of options, and you can see, that matches completely what this person is feeling or what you're feeling, and you can assess that through the book. There's ways to check and cross-reference to make sure you get the right remedy there. And like anything, you become better at it. You become familiar with the remedies. You can see that when with your clients and people or friends and loved ones, you can see the remedies in them, because you've looked at them, you've studied them, you've read about them, and even if you've never used them before, you'll be reminded of, oh yes, I did read something like that, and that really matches what you're going through. So that's there. Can I actually just, I don't want to get in the road of where this podcast is going. Go back to what you were talking about, the vibrational side and people listening to music and sending the vibrations through the body, calming influence, whatever. It's an interesting thing. I always say, flower essences have been brilliant for a lot of my IBS sufferers, which IBS is a pretty broad term, but covers a lot of types of symptoms. But I'll say to people, when you go out to dinner and you go to a dinner party and you're not too comfortable with the people there, or you don't like them, how's your digestion go? And these are the people that are particularly, having the nervous stomach. Say, oh, I know it never goes down well, and even if I eat well, I just feel uncomfortable. And I said, well, flower essences can help you deal with the emotional stuff, the fact that you're not relaxing and you're not able to sort of assimilate those things properly. So it can have a dramatic effect there. And I'm just helping someone with IBS and those who is vulnerable in that way, and a lot are. Put them in the wrong, if they're in a very relaxed time on a holiday, sitting out in the sun, on a recliner, and they're eating something, they can probably get away with foods that they don't usually get away with. So, there's a really good way, and it helps them relax. As I said, it's if you like, it is the vibrations throughout the body. It's helping the person to relax, and let things be, and in that case, assimilate the foods and the situation and the environment in a comfortable way.
Yeah, I mean, after all, that's what humans are. We are an abundance of chemicals and vibrational energy, vibrational charge. So it makes sense to me that it works, but it does take a bit of time to get your head around the concept, admittedly.
And just on that point, look, we could go on. If someone's waiting for this, that's the best explanation, I will now take them. I think they might be waiting for a while. Some will jump in. Some will be, just trust people that they know what they're doing. But look, there's no substitute for personal experience and trying them. And as I said, you don't, because of the quantity of flower in the actual flower essence, you're not going to have, any of the side effects you get with pharmaceutical drugs or anything like that. It's not going to force you into a particular, there is still that sort of choice within. So that's another important point. I mean, it's a frustrating thing sometimes. I'd like to give a remedy to, you mentioned your kids before, and just make sure it just works. But ultimately, human beings have a choice there too, which is a bit unlike drugs or pharmaceuticals. They have an action, and you really can't stop that action. Whereas flower essences, they almost they broaden your perspective. They give you a choice, better choices to react in a different way, in a more adaptive and positive way.
So I'm guessing this book then is very multi-dimensional in anatomy, physical and emotional and mental aspects. Do you want to dive into that a little bit?
Well, I go in the first third of the book. That's the theory and practice of flower essence therapy. Looks at a bit of the history, the trailblazers, Dr. Bach, obviously, and the FES people, and Ian White in Australia, these trailblazers. We talk about that. We also talk about, where are they acting? What are they acting on the system? And I bring in multi-dimensional anatomy. So that's looking at our physical, the etheric, the emotional, the mental side. So they're all parts of us. They're parts of a human being. And the deeper you go, the more profound assistance you can give to that person. And flower essences and homeopathy and these types of things, and even we mentioned acupuncture and things like that, work on that level. And it's almost pre-physical. It's biophysical, and there's just a great opportunity to get deeper in there and get more to the root cause of problems that people have. So I take a bit of a journey through all that multi-dimensional anatomy, through the chakras. These things have been written about and known about for thousands of years. There's not new information, but I put it in a different context. And for a lot of people, that really gives them the foundations of understanding. Oh, that's how it's working. That's where it's working. So for other people, they may not want to go there. They're just happy to take the flower essence or prescribe the flower essence, or they might have their own interpretation of how they believe it's working. But the important thing, it is safe and it does work. But I look at that, and if you're interested in, perhaps the latest and on that, bringing in again into the sort of language of today, some of the things that we've known for thousands of years, but just putting it in, layman's and language today. And I think it's written by a person who thinks in those terms all the time. So it's coming from, I live and breathe it, and I think about that when I'm with my clients. I'm thinking about that energetic side. So, it's not something totally intellectual or theoretical for me. I live and breathe it and practice it, and I try to impart that in the book.
We should also mention that Mark has got a flower essence course, correct? So you teach about flower essences. So when you say you live and breathe it, you really do live and breathe it. You are the most knowledgeable person that I've ever known in this space. So you've also been a researcher for the FES flower range. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've given them feedback. There are certain people over the years that give them feedback about remedies that they're bringing into circulation. And with respect to them, they really don't put anything, they don't start selling anything or giving indications of how to use it until they're really comfortable. In the book, I go through and I do use their what they call the 12 windows of perception. So there's the botanical history, there's what it's used for in herbal medicine, how it grows in nature, the colour, the orientation, the type of growth. All of these things are taken into account to understand how this plant can help a person. And I go through all of those. And the doctrine of signatures is another thing, how we can interpret what's going on, what's the potential healing of a plant by its outer form. So all of those things, even we have our scientific research, and I talk about my own double-blind trial. I talk about some double-blind trials that are there, but we talk about also the more qualitative research, and that includes all those, as I said, windows of perceiving how these things will work and help people using other things such as colour and shape, etc. So all of that's in that first third, and as you say, I've been teaching it for probably look, I'd finished Southern School of Natural Therapies. I started practicing and I wanted more. And there was a couple of weekend workshops, was about all there was on flower essences. And I said, that's not good enough. I've got to start a course. And so I started it from scratch, got through. The people that did my first course probably understood that, and I was quite honest about it. But I was learning, and I learned from them, and I have learned from all well, obviously my clients, but particularly the students that I've taught. And all of that goes into the book. And again, an extra 15 to 20 years experience of that is again injected into the new book.
And for those that are unaware about the doctrine of signatures, just a brief explanation. It's like you look at a plant or an item, like, for example, I like to associate the walnut. Right? It looks like the brain. And so therefore, because it looks like the brain, it positively impacts the brain. Japanese knotweed, the herb, also known as the active constituent resveratrol, grows like a weed, and it just grows everywhere, and it can get into every crevice. And that's exactly how it works in the body. It just helps to drive nutrients and blood flow to the extremities in the body.
Yeah.
So
can I just say about walnut, just because you brought up walnut, because the signature, and it's a good one to big up, because there's a couple of things I've added to the descriptions. And yes, I made that the association that you just did there, that if you crack open a walnut, looks like a brain. And it's times in your life when you need to keep your brain on and don't get emotionally distracted. You have to keep your mind on what, and to move forward, to let go. Dr. Barr called it the attachment, or the detachment remedy, just to let go of attachments that are no longer serving you. But another thing I found out about the plant, that when it's growing, there is a certain stage where it's incubating that flower and fruit, where it gives off an odor which keeps insects. It's horrible for insects and animals and anything. Quite okay for humans, but it keeps them away. So it's another example of how, when we need walnut, we need to be wrapped up a bit and protected from all these outside influences, so we can get on with the job we need to. So there's some really much more subtle signatures like that, but it actually gives us another dimension of understanding of that plant, which you then, or that flower essence, which you then can apply to your clients. You see they really need that at the moment. They need to stay with their thoughts and concepts and not be distracted by all this thing that are going around them. So it gives you more. And I, that was added to the walnut. So these type of things, there's always more. They're not saying that things are different, which science, my background science, sometimes is almost throwing out what we knew to put something new in. None of that has happened with this book, but it's more just a growth. And that's what I like about Nature Cure, all of the natural side of things, that we're not throwing anything out. The language might be changing a bit. It might become a bit more sophisticated and a bit more in a language where people can understand and respond to in this day and age. And that's needed and that's necessary. As I say, an idea is only as good as its time. So these magnificent things have to be put in the context of now. And again, that's what you try to do with the book, and upgrading of the book. I will say it's a book for anyone. I think it's essential for people that want to take this flower essence therapy a little bit further as therapists in any modality. But it's also very accessible to lay people. And I know from the people that purchase it, there's a broad spectrum of people that actually buy it. So it's accessible, and I try to make it that way. So that was the only other thing I wanted to mention there, that some people might think, oh, will it be over my head? No, it won't be. And the other thing, if you're in a completely different area of expertise, your expertise, it's still something you can integrate into your modality or your health approach or whatever. Yeah.
I know it's a very successful book. I don't know if I want to say the old version. The previous version was very successful, and I know you've had people from all over the world purchase your book. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this one and having this one as a desk resource, as I have the previous.
I will say one thing. Over the years, we've all been stung by getting books that say, oh, new version, upgraded version, and they've changed 3 lines. Any parent who's had kids at school and pays that amount that you pay for textbooks, and they've changed page 304 with 3 words, but you've got to get a new one. I'm not doing that to you. If you have purchased the other, you won't be disappointed. There's a lot of changes.
So would you say about 90% of the book has been updated?
Well, certainly 90% of the remedies have had additions, revamped. Yeah, for sure. We've kept it. It's not like I've added just chunks of text. I've just refined things and things like that. I think there's a few extra pages, but it's just meatier and for me, it's got more substance.
Yeah, more concise for our current age,
concise, yeah,
or our current era.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Mark. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. I'm sure I'll see you next month when we do another FES video. Actually, speaking of which, if you haven't had a chance, please do make sure you check out all of the Mark Wells FES videos. They run for about 7 to 10 minutes each edition, and follow us on socials to see story highlights and more. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.